Hi, this is Terri Levine, the Business Growth Guru. And as you may know, I've owned several different businesses over the course of my career, and I've also had the opportunity to sell many of those businesses. So I've become a bit familiar with business valuation. And because we always start with the end in mind, we always think about what will our business be worth. Yet a lot of people don't know how this is measured. I'm certainly not a financial person, but I am going to give you the understanding of, in general, of the ways that businesses are evaluated so that you can be looking today at what the value of your business is and how that would be valued. So if your goal is to sell a business later down the road, and I really urge you to consider that as an exit strategy, you'll want to be able to work your numbers in these kinds of direction. Now, assessing the value of a business really depends on a lot of factors. It also depends what kind of a business it is, what the market is like, but there's a lot of factors that go into this. So again, I'm kind of giving you the general rules of thumb, but things like the number of employees or the number of locations, the number of years in a certain business or a certain industry, or even at a certain location, can all play into the valuation of a business and can affect the amount of money that you get for selling your business. Businesses can also be valuated differently if the owner is not part of the package. So in other words, if they were to buy your business and not have you, and you really were the big asset of the business, they'd give you a lot less money. If you have equipment in your business, if you're a restaurant or a physician's office, it'll depend on your equipment or your facilities or your location or your supplies. It could depend upon your inventory, how much of whatever it is that you sell or offer is in your warehouse or your distribution center. So these are all some factors that go into play. Certainly the type of customers or clients that you have. Are they loyal? Have they been with you long term? This very much affects the degree of the valuation, as well as your employees. How loyal are they? How long have they been with the company? Are the customers tied and loyal? Or are the customers tied too closely to the owner? And so if the owner wasn't there, they wouldn't buy from the business. So these are things to also think about when you're creating your brand. If your brand is all you, it makes it difficult to have an exit strategy at the end because the company needs to be stable without you. If I'm evaluating your business, I want to know that the same kind of earnings will continue to happen with you or without you. Otherwise, I wouldn't really want to buy your business because the value would go down if you're not there. So again, it could have to do with location and inventory and employees and customers and the nature of your business. But there really is sort of a, how do I want to say this, there's a process that most business evaluators go through that is very, very similar. I sold 3 completely different kinds of businesses, and in each case, they were taking a look at not only the earnings as a factor, but they were taking a look at things that were less tangible, not just the money, but what I'll call the less tangible assets. For example, my team, my staff, my employees, my customers, my inventory, my locations, my systems, my policies, my procedure, how well things ran. But I'm here today to give you the 3 different approaches that are typically used in valuing a business. And again, I'm not here as a financial expert. I'm here as a person who's sold a number of businesses and who's helped several business owners, actually quite a few business owners, broker their own deals to get their business valuated. All 3 approaches seem to me to be the most common. They're the only ones that I've run up against in my 30 plus years of doing this. And they're pretty much standard practice in the industry, and these are the ones that I believe if you know these and you understand these, you can make a better exit plan. The first approach is the one that I actually had heard about first. It was the only one that I knew about, and it is really the approach where it's completely asset-based. So that was the approach that I knew about. When I was selling my very first business, I thought they're just going to look at what my assets are. And so my assets were everything. At the time, I was a speech language pathologist. I had a lot of equipment. We had a lot of audiology equipment, a lot of speech pathology equipment. We had a lot of medical supplies, gloves and tongue depressors. We had a lot of assessments, a lot of tools, a lot of speech pathology techniques for the people that we worked with that came in packages. So they were assessing those things as an indication of the value. The value, again, was based upon the tangible things that I had that would need to be replaced. Okay, so these were assets that would have to be replaced. And again, this is the first way that I understood at the time how this worked. It was all tangible assets, things that they could sell if they chose to. My location, could it be sold? What kind of condition was it in? And so that's the first way that I know of evaluating a business, is really looking very much at the tangibles. And I think to this day, that is still a very commonplace way of evaluating a business. Now, there is another way that I've become familiar with, which is more of a market approach. And the market approach is looking at indications of value based upon your current market size and the market growth that's expected. So again, I'm not a mathematician, but they come in using a lot of fancy ratios or factors, really looking at how much could your business grow or how much more market share could you get. They certainly look at your earnings. In all these cases, they are looking at your earnings, your numbers, at all the financial numbers, and they're also looking at could they increase those numbers. And again, they do look at the assets, what you have, what materials you have, and what you've done in the past, what your average transactions are, expecting you to do similar kinds of transactions. And they're also looking, by the way, at the marketplace. And is the marketplace growing or shrinking? They don't want to buy something that's not economically feasible, so I'm sure that makes sense to you too. These ratios that they use, or these factors that they use, are pretty much determined by two things. Number one, there's kind of a standard that they use in your industry and they'll apply to you. But number two is really at your particular market. So someone may sell a business in New York City for more than somebody sells it in, I'm just making this up, Iowa, because they do make comparisons into different geographic locations and market growth. So they'll look at everything. You've got to have your numbers ready. You've got to have, your sales and your earnings. It also helps to have your marketing plan. It helps to list every asset that you currently have in your business or in your company. And again, they're basically derive a formula. And it's different for every industry, I should say that. In one business that I owned, the ratio was 2.5%. Later on, when I helped rehabilitation businesses and physical therapists sell their clinics, very often we were looking at giving them 4 times the value. So you also need to understand that there's going to be a standard for your industry. Now the last way, and I'm very familiar with this approach because I sold a couple of businesses way, this is the income approach. And the income approach, they are looking at indicators of your value. What is your business or company valued at? And they basically take a look at some level that you're currently doing. They average out what your level is and what your growth level might be and how much earnings you have. And that's where they come in just with a formula. They're not looking at any of those other things. They're looking at sales numbers, and then they're converting those earnings into a dollar value that they're willing to give you. Now again, I'm not the mathematician, so understand that they come in using some kind of a formula. And again, I'm seeing, every business is different. I've seen one that only sold for 1.5 times more than the current sales. Some I've sold for 3, but they come in using a rate for your industry, and they'll multiply that rate for you. They'll tell you that in that industry you can get 3 times sales or 2 times sales. So that's a very, very common way, just coming in, not looking at assets, but coming in and looking at these indicators and nothing else. So today I want you to start thinking about what is the end. Always start with the end in mind. And if your business is going to be sold by assets and income, we want to make sure you've got assets and you've got good income. It's time to start thinking, even if it's day 1 of opening your business or the day before you open, I recommend you start thinking of how people will appraise your business in the future.